I'm live with these ugly feet. All right.
My toes.
All right. Here we go. Make sure nothing
People are going to
breaks.
be wondering why we were showing our toes.
Well, we had a special request from some people with weird fetishes. Just kidding. It's a joke. Bam.
Okay, Kung Fu shoes. There are so many different types of Kung Fu shoes. I only happen to have this one right here, the original. Actually, the original were those slippers that we used to use back in the 80s that were absolutely horrible, and they would just fly off when people would kick.
But
and
people
they had
thought
that,
they looked like Bruce Lee.
They did look like Bruce Lee shoes, right? So, but they did have those like slippery soles.
Like
They're rubber, but they were like really slick.
like a
And they were
plastic
like
rubber.
slip-in, slip-on shoes.
Right.
Those are not good for Kung Fu.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of types. And what's a little quick side note here with 40 Fit Fu is, as you know, Sifu Mimi is the head instructor of the Wah Lum Kung Fu Temple, and she just had to order a ton of shoes.
Yeah, we just got, I want to say 6,000 pairs of shoes.
Right. Should last us a few years.
That should last us a few years. So, and the reason I go through all this trouble to get these shoes is because they bend like this.
Yeah, I like that.
And Oscar's going to tell you why it's important that they bend like this.
All right. Before we start, as always, we are not doctors. And if you have serious foot issues, please go see a medical professional. Got it? All right. So here's the thing. We like to think a lot about the evolutionary perspective. Your body is a superstructure that over thousands, millions of years evolved to become the human that you are now. And your foot is this amazing structure that supports your entire body. And it evolved to be in a certain way. Shoes are a new thing. They're kind of like a luxury, right, over the past few thousand years or so. And even over this past century, they have become a real luxury where they kind of identify who you are.
Right.
Like, you wear Nikes and I wear Psyches because my mom couldn't afford the Nikes, right? Stuff
I
like that.
actually always wore Kung Fu shoes growing up.
Right.
So, I mean, there was a time, I'm going to admit, I did like love my Nikes and all. But growing up, I pretty much wore Kung Fu shoes to school all the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this at the time, but
How
you
great it
told
was
me
for
that that was actually really good for me. So specifically, those of you just joining us, thank you for being here. But this is 40 Fit Fu, and we pretty much like to give you guys some tips and advice as we have aged. Like I've aged doing Kung Fu since I was young.
Might I add.
And Oscar started Kung Fu, more like in his 20s, and now as he's approaching 40, it's kind of like a different ball game. So we like to kind of give you guys some insight. And today's episode, as you saw our feet, I don't know why we showed you our feet, but
that was not a good move on my part.
yeah, at least I have a pedicure. Like at least my toes are French done. But anyways,
I have been told my feet look sort of like a hobbit.
but some people might like that.
Yeah.
That actually is good for barefoot, right? So, but today we're talking about shoes because everyone's going to throw out tons of debates on the best one. And we're not actually talking about the best brand because there's of course a ton of brands out there. I personally like mine to be plain like this so that I'm not distracted when I do my Kung Fu.
Yeah, the
We
best
like
brand
it to
is
be-
the one that
does this.
we get at Wah Lum.
That's right.
because
The
they're-
ones that do this. So back to the science of why. Go back to your evolution.
I mean, where do I start? This seriously could take me like 30 minutes. That's how much I love talking about shoes. Okay, so let's talk. Well, this is 40 Fit Fu, and we're talking about Kung Fu people, right? So
Right.
we got these shoes right here, right? Now, yeah, I like the folding part, right? But really, what it is we didn't evolve really to wear cushioned shoes, and modern shoes have a lot of cushion and a lot of sole. They protect the shoe, they encase it almost like a cast. And really the thing about it is, if you think about how many nerves are in your fingertips, your feet, and your lips, they're meant to process a ton of information. So the reason we want shoes that don't have too much of a sole, that are pretty flat, that can bend like this, that allow your feet to kind of grip the floor and get more information to your nervous system. And that information that you get to your nervous system allows you to know where you're at in time and space, like a 360-degree virtual version of yourself that mind maps in your brain, which then allows you to move better and do your kung fu better. Now, we talk about this as a nice test because this just shows and proves that it's not a super thick sole shoe. If you imagine a really thick sole shoe, it'd be hard to kind of
own here at this house.
Which we actually don't own. So that's just like the test, which is why we say that. But the main reason why in strength training, I do a lot of my strength training barefoot, but in kung fu and pretty much throughout any other fitness activity, I like to wear a thin sole shoe. The main thing you need to think about is information, is that I just want more information going through my nervous system. And there's a thing you can look up called the human proprioceptive homunculus or something.
Proprioception.
But basically it
Blowing your
shows,
mind.
if you think about where we have the most nerves, it just shows an exaggerated, like really big feet, really big hands, and really big lips, because that's where we get a ton of information from. And if your foot is encased in a thick-soled shoe, then you're not going to get information. Enough information to be able to know where you're at and then be able to move well. And in Kung Fu, you have to learn how to move well. That is just scratching the surface. You let me know how much more.
Okay, before that, we do have some questions and some comments, and I actually going to give it up to Hip this time. We should have thought of it. It's 40 feet food today.
Okay, and this one's for you, Hip. My knees, couple of slaps.
Okay, and then a lot of people are replying like, yay, we're happy to talk about shoes. A lot of people like the Feiyus, which are very similar to what we showed you here. They are a little bit thicker than this, but it still folds nice in half. We actually sell them like with no writing on it, no distractions. We sell them all black. We still have that style though, so I have to get those special ordered, and they did. Actually,
but those are I consider those my sneakers. So the Kung Fu shoes, I like to do Kung Fu in shoes that are a little bit thinner. And if you are a Kung Fu practitioner or Chinese martial arts, or even a lot of movement people are really into the Feiyu style, Feiyus is what I consider my sneaker. Like that's what I do almost anything else that would require
longer walking, like if we're in Barcelona and we need to walk several miles. I think we did like over 15 miles one day or something crazy. So that's where, you know, maybe you want a little more support. So a big question everyone's asking here is randomly, Kung Fu shoes, are they comfortable for people with flat feet? And we get this question a lot from students coming in, especially, you know, like kids come in and they just wear whatever shoe we give them, right? But a lot of adults come in, and us 40 fitters, right? We all come in and a lot of people have this question, oh, or I have wide feet or I have narrow feet. So maybe you can address first the flat foot.
Okay, so let's talk about our age bracket. Remember that the structure of our feet is, in some instances, yes, genetically predisposed to have things like club feet and other things like that, or more flat than not. But the way that our feet are, flat or arch, or the way that they are, is mainly determined by the stresses that you put onto it over the course of your life. So if you are 40 years old and you've always had this like thick-soled shoe and you've needed arches, then your foot has adapted to that. And to take from, you know, if you could see my hand, a thick-soled shoe like that, and then to go barefoot or to go really flat right off the bat can be a lot of stress, more stress than your body is used to. So you may need to find a way to kind of ramp down into it. But if you do it the right way, just like anything else, there's a progressive overload over time where you do it in a smart way, then having thin-soled shoes are actually really good for flat feet, because your feet are built to have a little bit of an arch, and an arch is in nature the greatest supporting structure out there.
Yes.
It supports your entire frame. So, and the way that you weaken an arch is by putting something underneath it. So you'd want to kind of build strong feet. So that's like a roundabout way of saying yes. However, my caveat
Having
is...
said that,
it's very important that you know yourself and that you think to go ramp slowly if you've never worn anything other than that.
For example, a friend of ours, you know, read that what's it called?
Born to Run.
Born to Run, and they were like, oh, I'm gonna go to minimalist shoes, and they just like did such a quick switch and did like a 10-mile run or something crazy, and then they couldn't walk the next day. And I'm like, obviously, everything you do, you want to ease your way in to make that transition. But you've also given some pretty good advice. I know it's a little off the shoe subject, but still with the flat foot and building that arch.
Yeah.
You've given some good advice to actually a couple people that are logged on now
Yeah.
on how to help create that arch, really briefly, and then we'll go back to the shoes.
Okay. So very briefly on creating a way to create an arch. Again, don't overdo it. Real quick with that whole, oh, I read Born to Run, I'm going to now do marathons barefooted when I've never done it. That's a case of like a correction where we're trying to correct, yes, the fact that our shoes are enclosed with an overcorrection.
Right.
Which is, I think, the case with almost everything in fitness. Any information that we get that's new is like, oh my God, so I saw that eggs are bad. Throw away all the eggs, right? So I think it's a case of almost everything where you get a little bit of information and then you overcorrect.
Right.
However, a way that you can start thinking about building up your arch, which does take time. Remember, if you're 40 years old and you spent many years doing things a certain way, it's also going to take some time to adjust it. But if you could imagine this as my foot, you can start doing things where you think of trying to splay your toes out, gripping the floor, and trying to create force over time, which will build all the muscles of the bottom of your foot, those plantar fascia muscles, and start trying to create a little bit of an arch. And then in addition, if again ramping up slowly, you can start doing where you do small barefoot jumps and hops where you're thinking of gripping the floor. Kettlebell swings are a really excellent tool for this because you're doing a ballistic movement of producing and reducing power, and like turning on and off those muscles. Mm-hmm. Of course, over the course of time, you can start building an arch, and that has been proven. Like there's people who do that, and even on an extreme case, club foot. I've got a client who has a club foot, and her feet have never felt better ever since she started strength training with me barefoot.
Yeah.
Because she was so afraid. She's like, wow, my feet
and
feel
just
so
even
much
just
better.
I have an arch, but like I still roll my foot out. I use that lacrosse ball, or if you don't want to go so hefty, you can use a tennis ball. All of that stuff. All those tools are really great and really can help with that because
I just read Hip's comment, by the way.
I was going to tell you, I had to read his comment last week and I wasn't going to read it out loud, so it's up to you if you'd like to read Hip's comment today.
Hip's comment, one of our, well, you know what,
loyal
since he's
followers.
a loyal followers, we should read this comment out loud.
I think it's your turn this week.
Does that mean that shoes are actually proprioception, contraception? Okay?
Thank you.
Think about that and let your mind marinate on that.
So, but it is really actually something I think that's really overlooked because, we wear a uniform to class. Everybody just thinks they can slap on whatever shoes, but if you think about it, that is our route to the ground. And I did a Kung Fu Pod episode on rooting and also interviewed one of the Sifus of Wah Lum in Boston, and we talked strictly about rooting. But, the more distance you put between your body and the ground, is the further you're pulling yourself away. So for example, in Kung Fu, of course, everybody who practices here knows that the horse stance is like one of the most important positions. What are we trying to do? We're trying to root into the ground. And the further away, your foot is, the less balance. Those of you who do Tai Chi and you're doing one leg balance, the further away you are, giving yourself a platform. It's like wearing wedges or heels or something and trying to do one leg balance stuff. It can be done, because I will tell you I have done it, but don't try that at home. But it's not ideal, so the closer you are to the ground, which is why strength training, you like to feel the ground. But for Kung Fu, I really believe in like rooting and like what Oscar was saying with building that arch. You almost do the same thing in your stance. You actually should feel the ground. Like you don't want to be like curled up.
Fatigue yourself.
You don't want to fatigue yourself, but you do want to have where each one of my toes has an awareness, and I have an awareness, and I always like to kind of tell people, like, imagine you're in the sand and you're feeling the sand. Mm-hmm. You should have an awareness of the ground and actually know, where your balance is at, where the floor is, and be able to find that rooting to where you are that tree that just won't be moved.
Yep.
Right?
So I just thought of another reason for the flat feet. So for the flat shoes, sorry. My main thing that I mentioned is information, right? Of you getting that information into your brain. But even without that, let's say you just have a thick-soled shoe that raises your heel a little bit. So you can see from the side of me just going from here to here. That immediately shifts my center of balance forward. Your center of balance should be over your base of support, which is your two legs. and kind of dead center of your body. So if you have a little bit of a heel lift, you will also shift your center of balance forward, which is not effective for all of these movements that we're trying to do in Kung Fu, any kind of martial arts as well. You know your center of balance is important, but just in general. So that's another reason why we train with those Kung Fu shoes.
And question with that too, just thinking about that, like we always say, ladies, those who wear heels and whatnot, it's actually pretty bad for your back as well.
Really bad for your back, but I gotta give it to the, I mean, a nice shoe.
I do love my Christian Louboutins, I'm not gonna lie.
Women, you do whatever you want to do, and
but then I have to roll out my foot on the lacrosse ball, so you know.
But an exaggerated version of that heel lift are like these female shoes, you know, with a big heel lift. And again, showing you from the side is you're taking yourself from this nice structured stacked position to an arched back position,
and then you have to compensate.
Then you're walking, and so. A few things with walking too is every step is 1.5 to 2 times your body weight is on each step. When you run, it's 2 to 4 times your body weight. When you jump, it can be up to 10 times your body weight. So this goes back to 2 things. One is wearing the right shoe is important because each step does matter because it accumulates over time. And then 2, remember that this is why it's also important that you don't go from this encased shoe that you're used to, this thick-soled shoe, to barefoot right off the bat, because each step is 1.5 times your body weight.
Exactly.
And so you have to just like anything else, train yourself to do that.
We always like to use Grandmaster Chan as like this great example. And of course, wearing Kung Fu shoes, but and also Asians in general, we don't wear shoes in the house. We're used to kind of being more barefoot. I think that's a cleanliness thing too. But I think that side benefit is I was always used to being barefoot in home. And then when I would go out, I was like, well, why am I going to buy more shoes? I got, 5,000 shoes at the temple. But I would wear Kung Fu shoes. So my foot actually was conditioned where I didn't understand why people said, oh, Kung Fu shoes hurt me, I can't wear them.
So I think if you want to talk about like tactics of how to ramp up this way, one is, you can try, if you're not barefoot at home, you can try that. But if you're not barefoot at home, try it for like set some amount of time. So you get home, instead of going barefoot for the whole night, maybe just try barefoot for like 30 minutes or so, right? Also, expose your feet to a lot of different environments. So we have a rock mat here. I've got a rock mat at the gym.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just a bin full of rocks that you stand on. And the reason is because again, evolutionarily speaking, this nice smooth tile, nice wood grain floor, nice smooth surfaces is not what we evolved to explore. And our feet, because they give us all this information, Hip is our resident geek, so whatever the highest def TV that you can imagine right now, that gives you
20K,
whatever gives you this beautiful,
means,
clearest
4K.
picture, is if what your feet are used to kind of being exposed to with rocks and sand and grass, all these different terrains. And by even walking barefoot only on tile, you're getting information, but it's more like you're getting a black and white picture.
Right.
And then when you have your shoe covered, you're basically blindfolded, right? So there's different stages, and you have to kind of slowly ramp yourself into that position. So you can start, if you're home and you're not barefoot, start there. Start with incrementally barefoot. You can expose your feet to more different types of surfaces, rocks, rolling on lacrosse balls, golf balls, tennis balls. You can, if you have a thick sole shoe, look for a shoe the next time you go shopping that's a little bit thinner. And then a little bit thinner after a few months, and then over time.
Yeah, and we said it at the beginning of the episode. For those of you who are just tuning in, though, we're not doctors. If your doctor told you you need XYZ shoe, you can listen to them and whatever. Yeah. But we will tell you, as martial art practitioners and instructors, we do find that this is definitely the most beneficial, and for all the reasons that Oscar just gave you from the science perspective, but also, just traditionally speaking, it's like what you want to do is root yourself to the ground. So the closer you are to the ground, kind of the better. And I mean, I was gonna ask you about flip-flops because that's very controversial. Those Floridians love wearing flip-flops. And obviously you would never do Kung Fu in flip-flops, but just because
you can try and then you can sprain something.
Yes, so I would like you to kind of give your quick tip on flip-flops because that's been kind of a talk of the industry, have you?
There's a term they call like Hawaiian feet. If you look at Hawaiians who wear a lot of flip-flops, where if this were my big toe, it's kind of like curled like this, you know, so if you can imagine the foot and then that big toe just kind of curled in. The reason is because there's nothing to kind of support, to connect the heel of your foot to the heel of the flip-flop. As you walk forward, your big foot instinctively has to kind of curl to grip the flip-flop to prevent it from coming out. And even though it's a micro movement over thousands of steps throughout the day and years and months and whatever, then the foot actually that toe starts bending and it just looks gnarly. But not only does it look kind of weird, but also, again, you're not getting your foot to be splayed out and wide open.
Yeah, you want monkey feet.
You want monkey feet. Like our goddaughter, Carly,
yes.
At one time someone said, oh, so-and-so said I had monkey feet. And I was like praising her for it. I was like, I wish I had feet like yours. And I grabbed her foot. I was like, look how strong your foot is. She was always running around barefoot. She was always doing acrobatic stuff.
Yeah, and if you could pick up objects with your feet.
Yeah. And yes, that is definitely, that's my thing on flip-flops, which is why I never wear them unless you're going into an unknown shower.
Yes. Health first,
germs,
and
germs,
yes, and
and then the other thing is, before thinking of going completely barefoot, is realize that shoes do protect you from
unless you actually are a hobbit.
Yeah, I mean they protect you from glass and, and shards and cold, extreme weather and stuff like that as well. So keep in mind that some shoes also provide that benefit, which is a necessary.
Or they're just beautiful. Oh, sorry. We did have a couple comments / questions. One person was asking how big the rocks are that you have in your
Should I go
you
grab
have
one?
one right there. Yeah, he's gonna grab one. But and she's asking if it should be more like stones or bits of gravel. And like what he said earlier, in terms of having your foot adapt, but we do like the rocks to be
so here are my
more
rocks.
substantial.
So here's what I did.
And different shapes.
A good friend of mine, Jose, bought me this plastic bin for like $6. And then I went to Home Depot and bought like 2 $6 bags of rocks. And I just
But you want them smooth? You don't want like too much juxtaposing where it could cut your foot.
Here's my thing with that is your foot ready for that?
Right.
Right. So
have you built up your hobbit?
I wouldn't want to say no to that, right? Because again, you want to expose your feet to as many
if you're not ready.
safe surfaces as possible. I find that these smooth, bigger rocks is a little bit better. But if you got like rocks outside in your backyard and they're little like pebbles and it's a little uncomfortable, try walking on it. As long as there's no glass, as long as you're not going to cut yourself or hurt yourself, do it for
different
a few seconds.
surfaces.
The
idea is that you want to kind of mix it up, right?
And then, again, thinking about tactically, how are we going to do this on a day-to-day basis? If you have this bin and you have my role at home, which is washing the dishes, then you just take that bin, slide it right in front of the sink when you're doing the dishes, and there's 20 minutes of, a different type of
And for
surface.
all the reasons he said earlier in this episode, that's also why it's really good for your back too. Okay, we also had a comment, someone who stands on a ladder all day that causes plantar fasciitis, which we hear a lot of that term. Fasciitis, yeah.
I am not a doctor, but your plantar fascia are just muscles that wrap around the bottom of your feet, from your heels to your toes. And just like a lot of other muscles and tissue, things can get a little bit gnarly and tacked down. And things like rolling out the bottom of your foot with something like
lacrosse ball.
A lacrosse ball is my favorite tool.
Yeah.
A tennis ball is a little bit softer made, but in the order of like ramping up, which I think is also important, tennis ball, lacrosse ball, golf ball.
Yeah.
And just kind of get in there. And it's the same as if you think about almost a massage. If you've never gotten a massage and you have someone put their hands on you, you'd be like, ow, ow, everything hurts. Yeah. That just means that tissue's not healthy. So if you try rolling out the bottom of your feet and it hurts, that shouldn't be the case. That just means your tissue's not healthy and you've got to kind of manipulate it over time.
If you're bleeding, stop. But if it's like, oh, that hurts, well, that means you're probably just not conditioned yet and you just need to ease your way in. So take it one step backwards and then just ramp back up.
Yeah, I think a good litmus test for if you're able to handle something is, are you able to take a deep breath in it? So you can be pretty uncomfortable maybe standing on rocks for the first time, but if you can stand on those rocks or rolling out your feet, but you can still take a nice deep breath.
Which we talked about last week.
Yes.
in our episodes, so you
Yeah.
can go back and look at that. We are still working on getting the catalog over onto our Kung Fu Pod or fitness channel, so we'll work on that for you. But we did talk about breathing last week for those of you who missed it. We had a whole session on that. So if you can take that nice breath that we talked about last week while
and that shows that your
doing
body
the
is actually
exercise.
ready for it. If you're not able to take a deep breath, then that's a signal of your body saying, "Oh, back off a little bit."
Yeah, and the body's
So-
really smart. It kind of tells you what it
So
doesn't
don't
want.
back off completely, just back off a little bit at a time, and find where you can dip your toe in the water, right? Where you can find where you're able to access that a little bit. Just because something hurts right off the bat doesn't mean necessarily that that's the wrong thing for you. That might just mean that, just like almost everything else, we think that we're more advanced than we are. Humble yourself, fool. And just think, oh, what would this look like if I'm at a level 8 right now, what would this look like as a level 6, 7, or 5? Start a little bit lower and work your way back up.
But don't give up.
Do not
All right, it's that time, guys, to wrap it up.
I could keep talking about this, like, we could do like 5 episodes just on the feet.
I know. 40 feet fu to be continued.
If we do this again, it will be 40 feet food. We will do that. I like that idea.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for all the questions and comments today. Really appreciate it. Last one, Hip had to do physical therapy for his feet, and they said the same thing, foot rolling over a ball. So doctors are saying what we're saying is pretty much we're getting some nice reinforcement. Thank you, guys.
Last thing I would say is I did film the 90-90 stretch. If
that he
anyone
promised
here is
from
watching,
last 2 weeks ago.
and so it's a nice little instructional on how to get into that position, and we can, just like anything else, go to different levels of it and explain more of it. If you're interested, I can also do a quick video on how I would roll my feet with a lacrosse ball, and what that would look like, as long as you don't mind looking at ugly feet. That's all.
Well, maybe we can use my feet as long as they're painted.
I like it.
All right, thank you guys for joining us on 40 Foot Flu this week. We will see you guys again next week, guys and girls.
And
your
anything that you are. No judgment here, people.
Yes,
Enjoy yourself.
Everyone is welcome. Thanks for joining, guys. Bye.